Hello and welcome to Africa 360. I'm Kwangu Liwewe. South Africa's jazz maestro Hugh Masekela is internationally renowned for his soulful trumpet and his unique voice. For 5 decades, the legendary trumpeter has been making music which is loved by both the young and the old. At the age of 75, he still continues to tour the world, performing some of his classic hits. Africa 360 senior producer Lindy Mtongana recently caught up with Hugh Masekela, and she spoke to him about his illustrious musical career and the challenges that African artists are still facing.
A trumpeter icon, vocalist and a songwriter, Hugh Masekela's musical career spans more than 40 years. He's acclaimed worldwide as a pioneer of the African jazz sound. His music is a mixture of jazz, township jive, funk and Afrobeat. Bra Hugh, as he is affectionately known by his adoring fans, draws on years of diverse artistic influences and has an abundance of records to his credit. After signing to Warner Brothers in 1987, Masekela released a Mandela tribute hit single, Bring Back Nelson Mandela, a song which became a struggle anthem in the movement to free Nelson Mandela.
Bring back Nelson Mandela, bring him back home to Soweto. We want to see him walking down the streets of South Africa.
It was through his music that he fought South Africa's apartheid regime from outside the country. But after spending 30 years in exile, Hugh Masekela returned home in 1990. The same year, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. Masekela soon embarked on a homecoming spectacle known as Sekunjalo. His role as a world-acclaimed musician and a songwriter extends into that of a mentor and a cross-generational reference point for South African cultural life. After decades of making music, the 5-time Grammy Award-winning Masekela takes his place among legendary African artists who, with their pan-African experience and global horizons, have been ambassadors of African music internationally. The last decade has been the high point in Masekela's life and his illustrious career.
The Order of Ikamanga in gold, awarded to Hugh Masekela.
In 2010, President Zuma honored him with the highest South African cultural award, the Order of Ikamanga. In 2011, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Womax World Music Expo in Copenhagen. And US Virgin Islands proclaimed Hugh Masekela Day in March 2011. And now, at the age of 75, it seems Bra Hugh is not ready to put down his trumpet just yet. Bra Hugh Masekela, it's an honor to have you with us on Africa 360 today. We do thank you for joining us. To begin with, let's start with a song that resonates deeply with many South Africans, Bring Home Nelson Mandela. And it certainly globally cemented your reputation as both an artist and an activist. But perhaps just share with us how this song came about.
It's such a long story. You know, I grew up in Alexander Township, and my mother and father were social worker and health inspector in Alexander from the 1940s, you know, through the 50s. And when Winnie Mandela graduated from the John F. Meyer School of Social Work, her and Brigelia Bam came to do their fieldwork studies under my mother, and she actually adopted them because they were young girls from the Eastern Cape, and they got very close to her. And at the time, Nelson Mandela was courting Winnie, so we got to know him when we were still like in our teens. On my 45th birthday in 1984, he had a letter smuggled out of Portsmouth prison. And my wife at the time there was somebody whose father he had gone to university with, and he knew her name and the names of our children. And also, like, he wrote this very personal letter to say, hey, thank you. I actually have a copy of it in my trumpet. That's funny enough. When it said, we're so grateful, that your father can go and see my family, and want to encourage you and congratulate you on the school that you all have started there and on the recording studio that in Botswana, and wishing me all the luck. And it just blew me away that here's a man who's been in jail for 20 years, is encouraging me on a point there, and who's like actually living a very good life. And I just went to sit at the piano and I started singing the song. And my wife came rushing from the backyard and said, I don't know this song, when did you write it? And I said, Nelson Mandela just sent it. And that's how it happened.
And it seemed to have, at the time, then been the soundtrack to your return home in 1990, to Mandela's release, and tying in with, of course, with the unbanning of the ANC. Were you politically affiliated then? Are you politically affiliated now?
No, I've never been a member of any... I've never been a member of any political party. I've never... But my views are not very popular because I'm not an admirer of nationalism too much, or borders, because these are the things, to me, it seems that cause conflict in the human race too much. And the borders are borders that in Africa were not chosen by us. They were actually mapped out in 1886 after a party in Berlin that the Kaiser gave, and it was like a party where Gamina went and was sliced up. And it's amazing that we fight over those artificial borders in some countries. But when I look at the history of political parties internationally and historically, it's an element that's never really, in the end, benefited people. It's always benefited the party. And so I chose never to join any sort of popular movement, because then you're tied.
Well, I mean, you mentioned a little earlier being in Botswana. This is one of many countries you lived in your years of exile. And we've heard you speak before about how many friends suffered deep depression as a result of being in exile, some who may have died of substance abuse, etc. Do you think that there's a lack of appreciation of how lonely, of how dislocated the experience of exile was for artists and activists?
No, I never really felt in exile. I just felt I wasn't home. Because because of music, I've been a music fiend. I was bewitched with music from the time I was a baby. And my world was the world of music, and it had no borders. And I never thought that standing against injustice was a domain of political parties or artists or certain groups in society. I think it's incumbent upon everybody in life to object to injustice, which of course is a thing that everybody passes the buck on. So I've never really wanted to be pitied. I've never pitied anybody. And I think everybody defines their own destiny, and if you want to feel sorry for yourself, you'll join those people who are in the sorry lane. But the most important thing to me, and the thing that always kept me together, thanks to Miriam Makeba and Harry Belafonte, and of course the way I was brought up, is that heritage, who you are, where you come from, gives you a sense of being able to have a mirror against being consumed by other cultures, which is, I think, the biggest problem that Africans have.
We'll pick up on that point. So we're just going to take a short break, but don't go away. We are in conversation with Hugh Masekela, and this conversation continues after the break.
Wherever I go in the world, I don't see anybody imitating us, except for African Americans who don't know also that they're being imitated.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa 360, and this week we're in conversation with Hugh Masekela. Let's quickly talk about something you mentioned a little while ago, and let's do so perhaps in the context of one of your big hit songs, Stimela. Somebody's once called it a monument of a protest song. And I know that in the theatre production, Songs of Migration, you preceded the performance of the song by saying there are no happy songs about trains in Africa. You wrote that song 40 years ago. Do you still think that's true today?
Do I still think?
That it's true today, that there are no happy songs about trains, what they symbolize on the continent?
No, I think that internationally, historically, trains came with industry, and they came to break up the family structure. It was the first thing that broke up the family structure as we know it in the modern world. And not only in Africa, but in Africa it was sadder than everywhere, because in Africa trains were originally built to transport whatever was raped out of the ground to the ports, and also to bring the cheap labor of Africans whose lands have been expropriated or conquered to come and work for cheap labor in industrial cities and the mines and on the farms. And we always looked at trains. I mean, when I was a kid, I was born in Witbank, and there was a train we used to call Mangalanyan, But when we were kids, a train was a train. And when we grew up with our grandparents until we were old enough to go and work for them when we were 6 or 7. And they only used to come, in those small towns, they used to come home Easter and during the Christmas, the holidays. And so whenever we saw the train, it's like, Stimela, we are no mama, we are no baba. And we looked at the train as something that takes your people away. And I think just about every song that you've heard of the train is always about lament. But somebody who's been taken away, who's gone, why you go, kinds of songs. And so, yeah, the train, today is the plane, but the train has really did us in.
When it comes to colonialism and imperialism, what do you think is the single biggest devastating legacy that we see today in Africa?
Well, I think that the saddest thing is that we don't own the continent as Africans. We live in it, but we work for international industry. And we are actually a mega warehouse for cheap labor, basically. We don't own the continent. And until time comes where we might have an organization that says, let's scrap these borders and let's just work this place together and maybe negotiate to get it back.
It's easier said than done, though. I mean,
well, I don't think we'll ever get it back, because the governments that we have, the majority of them are actually surrogates of the international industrial cartel or whatever it is, complex. And I don't think it's in the interest of industry for Africans even to realize that the continent is theirs to start with. I don't think it's their interest to for Africans to get together, to admit that they're the same people, that Jamaicans and Trinidadians and Brazilians and we're all over the world. And actually we are more than the Chinese internationally, but we have been like conditioned to think that we're different people.
Now, I must just ask you, I mean, you speak about the adoption of the English language, the adoption of English culture or Western culture. You've recently given women with weaves a bit of a hard time. And I just wonder, I mean, I must ask whether this is something of a real bone of contention for you, a real issue, this...
No, it's like, well, first of all, when you look at it from an economic perspective, we give away $100 billion that we don't have in hair products every year to the rest of the world that we're imitating. And I think that our male population wears that hair but they put it on the women, you know. And again, and I've heard women say to me, hey, my boyfriend won't go out with me unless I come with something like this because I got born on a kaba. You know, he doesn't want to be seen with a bush woman. That's the one thing. So and then wherever I go in the world, I don't see anybody imitating us. You know, except for African Americans who don't know also that they're being imitated. But African American, everybody wants to talk like them, walk like them, sing like them, dance like them, dress like them. And they don't even know that because, like, even that has been taken away from them. Today, you hear people say cool and groovy, you know, and the high fives and all those things. You'd think that those things come from Europe, you know, but they come from African Americans. So anything that we do, the word hip came from us, you know, but anything that is grabbed. So we don't have a thing of our own. And then from my superstitious side, if you come here and come next to me wearing a dead person's hair, I am going to be uncomfortable. You know, just the thought of it, Wuti. And I can just see my grandma, you know. And it's scary. It's, when you look at it, to a certain extent, it's macabre.
Well, this conversation continues after the break. Do stay with us here on Africa 360.
The recording business today is as defunct as like a 1956 Chevrolet. You won't see it. Unless you go to Cuba, you won't see it in the street.
Well, Hugh Masekela celebrated his 75th birthday this year and shows no signs of slowing down, maintaining a very busy international tour schedule. Let's continue our conversation with Hugh Masekela. Let's go back to something you mentioned there about music of the 60s, 70s, 80s being conscientizing kind of music. And I think, you know, in particular, beyond the music itself, for you and many other artists, there was a conscientizing happening in the album titles and the album covers. The 1966 cover of The Emancipation of Hugh Masekela features you beaming with a smile, wearing this Paul Kruger top hat and the old South African flag.
It's a takeoff on Lincoln.
Oh, of Lincoln?
Yeah.
Because of the beard, yes.
And that cover was banned for about 6 months.
Exactly.
Yeah, because many distributors were conservative people in those days in the States, and they felt that we were making fun of American history. But it was an age of the 60s. I don't think it'll ever happen again. But internationally, it was an age where the establishment was up against the wall all over, you know. And then when Nixon came in, he actually stopped that in the name of law and order. And music ceased to be an element that, you know, inspired people socially and against injustice. And music was basically removed as a social consciousness vehicle to just become something like Omo or what's another thing? This Ace Millimil, you know, it's like that today. It's like how many, and it's sad because the people who have his have them, and they come And they're there for a year or two, and then they disappear.
In spite of this very serious political music, this activism music and conscientizing kind of music that you were writing, there were also songs like Grazing in the Grass that you mentioned, a big hit that appeared on an album called The Promise of a Future, written in 1968, for a future that at that time may have been very difficult to really believe in. What do you attribute the success of that song to?
Grazing in the Grass, it was just a happy song that people loved, universal. Just, you know, if we knew the chemistry to making hits, every musician would be rich, you know. But the people just choose, you know, just choose what they want. But it was sounds that people hadn't heard, and they just wanted to welcome them. And to a certain extent, you won't hear as much music now overseas as you heard then. And I always tell people there, I said, I don't know why you're playing music of people from overseas, because they don't play our music over there. But technology has really done us in to a very great extent, because the recording business today is as defunct as like a 1956 Chevrolet. You won't see it. Unless you go to Cuba, you won't see it in the street.
Well, I mean, you've certainly seen it all and done it all in a career that's spanned 50 years. At this point, at the age of 75, are you tired yet?
No, I mean, I think that with where I've been and the knowledge I have, I mean, myself and James Ngobo and Xolisa Ngema 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, started Sibojama Theatre. And we're bringing back musicals, you know, we did Songs of Migration, and we're working on Busi Mhlongo's, we're working on Miriam's history, on the Manhattan Brothers, on all the Queens of Song, and other stories that are all music related. And we're going to go into television and theater. The academy that I talked about, the academy / a place of entertainment that has to do with our heritage, is definitely something that I have to work on. At 75, I have to work fast, because I hear that when you reach 85, it's all over. So like I've only got 10 years, so I have to do a Lewis Hamilton fast forward. And I can't stop. I think that life is supposed to stop when you die. And I think that if you go and sit on your porch and say, I've done everything, now I should just rest, you might as well dig your grave right there on your porch next to your rocking chair.
Well, you've said to us that that you were bewitched by music from an early age. Would you care to cast some of that spell on us with your trumpet and grace us with a few sounds?
I hope I can still play. Okay.
Well, that brings us to the end of yet another edition of Africa 360, and a huge thank you to Hugh Masekela for having been our guest on the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. Please share your views on our discussion, and you can do that by joining the debate by going to our Facebook page, or you can tweet us your views at Africa360_ENCA. You can also send us an email to Africa360@enca.com. So until next time, it's goodbye for now. Thanks for watching.